Testing. Testing. 1, 2, 3. 그래요. Testing. 1, 2. Test. Testing. 1, 2. Test.
All right, we ready for the jury? Okay. All right, thank you. To be seated. Next question.
Why don't we put that back up, plaintiff's 1247. Again, this is the CAPS 5. You didn't administer this until you already had Dr. Curry's scores, did you?
That's not correct.
No, you administered it after Dr. Curry made a disclosure, correct?
That's not correct.
You administered it after Dr. Curry had administered hers.
I learned that in late February when she submitted her report.
In your disclosures until after Dr. Curry made reference to hers, right?
I don't recall the date of the final disclosure or the fourth disclosure.
All right. Can we go to the next page? Let's go to the top of the page. We'll blow that up. Instructions start with standard administration and scoring of the CAPS 5 are essential for producing reliable and valid scores and diagnostic decisions. See that language?
I do.
All right. You don't contend it's standard not to fill out the frequency line.
I think if you're filling it on the right side of the box, I think that's perfectly fine.
All right. So you think it's standard administration to simply leave blanks that are already in the form?
I didn't leave blanks when I needed to find out the frequency of the symptoms.
All right, let's go down a little bit further. Let's go to administration. It says, number 2, read prompts verbatim, one at a time, and in the order presented, and then has a variety of exceptions. With respect to the childhood trauma notations you made in the margin of the CAPS 5, you didn't read the prompts verbatim, did you?
I read the first prompt. If there was a yes, then I would have made a decision, do I need to administer a whole nother CAPS?
Right. And you ultimately didn't do that. You just simply wrote in the margin of the last one.
Because she wasn't endorsing those symptoms.
Okay. You talked about endorsement of symptoms. Ultimately, what you're looking for with respect to
Looking for what are the functional impairments as a result of the symptoms that the individual is experiencing.
okay. So, in fact, if you go to all the way to the end of the form, one of the things that we deal with is impairment in occupational functioning, right?
Correct.
All right. What's Ms. Hurd's occupation?
She's an actor.
All right. And she had just wrapped a major motion picture, correct?
That's correct.
So you didn't determine that she had an impairment in occupational function. She's still performing at literally the highest level of her profession, correct?
She had a number of PTSD symptoms while she was filming Aquaman 2
Right.
Aquaman.
that interfered with her ability to really organize a lot of resources for herself in order to go forward and film that.
I asked you whether she was performing at the highest level of her
come on.
profession. Yes, ma'am.
I don't know if I'm qualified to answer that.
Okay.
Digimon.
But did she report to you that she loves to cook?
She loves to cook, yes.
Yeah. Hike,
I don't recall hiking, but
read,
yep.
spend time with friends?
Come on.
If she can, that has been significantly diminished as a result of her PTSD symptoms as a result of this case.
She just had a baby?
She did.
Exercises every day?
For the most that I can tell, she does.
Yeah. Completed level 3 sommelier training.
She did.
All right, she did all of these things, and you've made a determination that she is impaired with respect to her occupational functioning.
I made a determination that the symptoms interfere with her functioning. She does these things, but it's not like the symptoms aren't there. She has to continue to work even though she has a panic attack, even though she has an intrusive recollection of the trauma, even though she's having heart palpitations and sweaty palms when something comes into her mind. It does not stop her from doing what she needs to do, but it does interfere.
Okay. So I'm going to ask you about another test that you administered, and that one's called the PAI. Do you know that one?
Yes, I do.
That's the personality assessment inventory.
That's correct.
Why don't we put in front of the witness the PX 1244?
All right.
Come on.
Thank you.
All right. So, Dr. Hughes, do you recognize PX 1244?
Yes,
And it's a list of critical item endorsements,
correct.
and that's derived from the PAI?
Correct.
And this is the PAI that you gave 9/26/2019.
I don't have the cover sheet in front of me, so
Why don't we scroll down to the bottom? Tom? There it is.
yep.
There
Thank
it is
you.
down there.
Thank you.
You bet. Okay. Now, critical item I'm going to move this document, PX 1244, into evidence.
Your Honor, I would request that the entire document be put in the case.
I'm only going to ask her about this piece.
I still would ask.
Well, it's his exhibit. Do you have any objection to his exhibit, which is just the first page?
No.
All right, 1244 in evidence.
Okay. So critical item endorsement. This starts a total of 27 PAI items reflecting serious pathology have very low endorsement rates in normal samples. These items have been termed critical items. And you're familiar with that concept?
Yes, I am.
All right. And I just want to ask you about a couple of the critical items. The first one is potential for aggression. This was deemed, under your PAI, a critical item. It says, sometimes my temper explodes and I completely lose control. How did that potential for aggression bear on your analysis?
Well, there's a few things. Number one, certainly Ms. Hurd reported to me that in her relationship that would happen. Her anger and her affect regulation would become impaired. Number two, you have to look at the total scales where that scale is not elevated, so it would not be a major cause of clinical concern. Number three, she had 4 responses that she could say to this question. Mainly true, very true, mainly true, sometimes true or false. She chose sometimes true. So she's answering honestly about her.
All right. So you've talked a little bit about this concept called malingering. And there's one here for potential malingering. And this is another one of these critical item endorsements. Critical items means that these are serious pathology, right?
Well, as you can see, it says endorsement of these critical items is not in and of itself diagnostic.
No,
So you need to review the content of the item, and that's how you make the determination. Is this something of clinical concern that you need to do more understanding about?
Okay, so this critical item endorsement, this one reads, under potential malingering, I think I have 3 or 4 completely different personalities inside of me.
Correct.
And she endorsed that as sometimes true.
Correct.
Okay.
And there's not one elevated malingering scale on the PAI.
Yeah. Let me ask you about another document. I'm going to mark the documents PX 1248. Sure.
1248?
1248.
All right, yes, sir. Okay.
All right. Can you put up PX 1248 just for the witness? Dr. Hughes, do you recognize this?
Yes.
All right. And these are critical items that were deduced on the TSI-2 critical items list.
Correct.
And what's a 0 mean?
Means that she scored a 0 on that item. She said it's not something that's relevant for her at the time frame that the test was administered.
And these are all self-reports, right?
Correct.
And so she scored a 0 on doing something violent because you were so upset.
Correct.
See that language? You knew Ms. Hurd to do violent things when she's upset.
This test specifies how often have you had these symptoms in the last 6 months.
Just in the last 6 months.
Correct.
All right. So she hadn't had them in the last 6 months.
Correct.
This test also asks and inquires about intentionally hurting yourself or cutting.
In the last 6 months
Right.
is the prompt.
All right. In the last 6 months.
Correct.
Had Ms. Heard previously indicated to you that she cut herself?
She indicated one time as a teenager in a reckless moment she did. It was stupid, and I never did it again.
All right. So that was the first time you met her. She indicated that she had cut herself. What did you do to satisfy yourself that she didn't continue to engage in that behavior?
As with most things, I asked about the frequency of the behavior and had it ever occurred again. Had she ever engaged in suicidal behavior or suicidal gestures? That's part of that screen.
Where did Ms. Heard cut herself?
I'd have to look at my notes to be sure.
All right. Why don't we do that? That's in your intake note, correct? Let's.
I don't recall.
Why don't we go to PX 938? And if you put it up for the witness. That's not it. Let's go to the next page. There we go. All right. PX 938. We're on the third page. This background information sheet has already been admitted into evidence. And there's a discussion here we talked about earlier about intimate relationships.
I'm sorry, the question?
Yeah, let's go back to the first page. All right, there we go. What number is this? This is in at 1246. So this page anyway, I'll ask that it be published to the jury. All right, we're going to do it again.
What, so 1246?
1246.
All right. Okay, it's in evidence. There's supposed to be redactions, though, but, okay. All right, that's in 1246.
All right. So why don't we blow up the intimate relationships section? There's intimate relationships here relative to a variety of people, including a person called Tasha.
Tasha.
Who's she?
She was Miss Heard's wife.
Okay. And that relationship preceded her relationship with Mr. Depp?
That's correct.
Did you say on direct that you saw no previous interpartner violence? Just yes or no?
I don't believe I did.
You don't believe that you saw interpartner violence, or you didn't say it on direct?
I don't believe I said that yesterday.
Okay. Your Honor, can we approach?
All right, yes, sir.
Thanks. Did you speak with Ms. Hurd around the circumstances that gave rise to the TRO?
With, on May 21st?
Yes.
Yes, I did.
Okay. Did Ms. Hurd ever tell you that James Franco spent the night with her at the ECB between May 21 and May 27?
I recall, I mean, again, it would be helpful to have my notes so I can tell you exactly what, but I do recall that she did see him at some point. I do not know if he spent the night.
Do you know if Elon Musk spent the night during that period?
I don't know.
All right. You cannot testify that Johnny Depp was not abused, can you?
I can testify that he had physical acts of violence perpetrated on him as well as psychological aggressive acts perpetrated upon him.
No further questions.
All right, redirect.
Dr. Hughes, you were asked about some presentations. I think plaintiff's 1241 was the first one. If we can bring that up. Tom, could you help me out with that? 1241?
Yes.
And if you can scroll down, what was the significance of this presentation? And can you give her control, or do you have to have control of the document? It's just one page? Oh, it's not the entire presentation. Okay. Can you please tell the jury what you provided in this presentation?
To the best of my recollection, it was what I spoke to you about before of how people who are not trained in forensic psychology but who are working with victims of domestic violence can go into court and navigate with the court system and present and talk about domestic violence in a legal setting.
Okay, thank you. And that's been moved into admission, that's been moved in, correct? Okay, well, let's go to the one that I don't think was 1242, please. Tom, if you could bring that up. All right, and is that just one page too? How many pages is that one? Okay. Do you recall this presentation, Dr. Hughes?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Could you please just, well, I'm going to move the admission of Plaintiff's Exhibit 1242, first of all.
Any objection? All right, 1242.
And could we publish it to the jury, please? And Dr. Hughes, could you please tell the jury, explain to the jury what this presentation entailed?
So I was asked by the head of the Kings County Bar Association to give a presentation about intimate partner violence, domestic violence, and how psychological experts can be of assistance. This was just because of how Brooklyn is, a bar association that was attended by many of the prosecutors from the Kings County District Attorney's Office as well as defense attorneys. And as I stated before, this presentation was about how to really understand cases of domestic violence, how to understand what if she drops the restraining order, what if she doesn't call the police, what are the myths and misconceptions about intimate partner violence, and when she uses force, what does that mean? How do we understand that? How do we evaluate for that? So again, without seeing the rest of the presentation, I believe that was the thrust of this presentation.
Okay, great. Thank you. Now, you testified about the notes you took and the notes you reviewed, and you were asked about some limited questions on testing. I'm going to ask for Defendant's Exhibit 1434.
You're going to do that one? You want?
No.
Okay.
Oh, we need, thank you, Sammy. But you were doing a fine job, Tom. I didn't mean to take it away from you. Thank you, Michelle. Dr. Hughes, is this your CV?
Yes, it is.
All right, I'm going to move the admission of Defendants 1434. You're out of completeness. They've got all the other records in here for Dr. Hughes. I'm trying to see completeness.
I understand. I'll sustain the objection.
Okay.
Next question.
Let's go to Defendants 1435, please. Now, Dr. Hughes, you've testified about the different testings that you administered, and this was one of the ones that I believe you testified to earlier, correct?
That's correct.
And this is the DSM-5?
This is the clinician-administered PTSD scale for the DSM-5.
Okay. I'm going to move the admission of 1435.
Any objection?
We object, because it has a lot of other documents, and it's not just the CAPS 5.
It's not the CAPS, it's the DSM-5. But she administered all these tests, Your Honor, and they can't, for completeness of record, they can't put in partials and then not have the rest of it. I think
Well, there was no objection to when they put theirs in. Now they're objecting to you putting.
I would say rule of completeness, Your Honor, Virginia Rule 2:106, that they can't just put a partial in and then not have the completeness of the testing in the documents.
Well, they put their test in. Now you want to put more tests in, correct?
Correct.
But that's not a completeness argument. Then that's just a different test.
Well, it's
But what's the objection, though? That there's.
Here's it.
Okay. All right. I'll sustain the objection. Next.
all right. Well, then we'll go for the other ones. You did the TSI. Well, before we go on to the others, let's talk about. Could you please tell the jury what you administered in this DSM-5 and why this is significant?
Objection.
Sustain.
Can you tell us why the DSM-5 is significant that you administered?
So the DSM-5 is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual for Psychiatric Disorders. It's published by the American Psychiatric Association. That's where it has all the criteria and all the information for our major mental disorders like major depressive disorder or panic disorder or PTSD. What the CAPS is, the clinician-administered PTSD scale, is it follows all of that criteria that's in the DSM-5 so that you can make a very accurate diagnosis.
And what, if any, diagnosis did you make as a result of this DSM-5?
Right. So not only on this, this instrument can stand alone where she meets PTSD criteria just by virtue of this instrument, pardon me, but also the other testing that I gave where she had elevated scales on PTSD measures which correspond with the DSM-5 symptoms of PTSD. So there were multiple measures that are consistent across time that she meets criteria for PTSD.
Thank you, Dr. Hughes. Now, you were also given 1 page of the scoring on the TSI 2 and 1 page with respect to the PAI. Do you recall seeing that?
It wasn't the scoring, they were the critical items on those respective tests.
Okay, well, I'm going to ask to bring up Defendant's Exhibit 1858. Which is the full PAI. And was this the actual testing and scoring?
Yes, this is the profile, the scores that are generated from the 344 questions that Ms. Hurd answered on this test.
And what were the results? What did you determine based on the testing of this PAI?
Well, that the results were valid and reportable. There was no evidence of exaggeration or malingering on this test, and there were significant symptoms that correspond with traumatic stress and post-traumatic stress disorder symptomatology.
And I believe you said again that there was no elevated scores. Can you explain to the jury what you meant by that?
Objection leading.
Overruled. Go ahead.
So elevated scores are a way that we get to know where a cutoff is to say that something is clinically significant, and that follows very standard statistical principles. So when a scale is elevated, it means that we have sort of greater confidence that this individual endorsed a lot of different symptoms that make this scale relevant, and then we want to figure out why that person is having an elevated score on something like depression or anxiety. It gives us greater confidence that, this person's maybe reporting depressive symptoms like people who are depressed.
And what would constitute an elevated score?
Well, on different tests, it's different things. Certainly on the PAI, it doesn't follow linear T-scores. It's a little different statistically, so you have to look at it differently. But certainly, it's usually about a T-score of a 65. And on some it's a T-score of a 70, which is a T-score is a normative curve, is a way of allowing us to compare people's scores, comparing your scores to the normative group of scores.
And would it be at all helpful to have the entire test as opposed to a one piece of paper or one page?
Well, certainly you cannot tell the entirety of how the symptoms that Ms. Hurd endorsed and the scales were elevated just by the critical items.
All right, I'm going to move the admission of Defendant's Exhibit 1858.
Objection hearsay.
And this is the completeness, Your Honor.
I'll sustain the objection. Next question.
Let's bring up 1859. And this is, you were shown one page from the TSI-2, the Trauma Symptom Inventory 2. Do you recall that?
Correct.
Okay. What is the significance of the TSI-2 exam, the full exam?
The Trauma Symptom Inventory is a test of common symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder and related traumatic symptomatology. And on this score, she had, elevations in intrusive experiences, which is the intrusive component of PTSD, where thoughts or memories or feelings come into your mind when you don't want them, with accompanying distress, and then the defensive avoidance, doing many, many different things to push it down, to try not to think about it, to try not to talk about it, so that you don't get upset. And she also scored high on a scale of relational avoidance, having difficulty feeling close in relations and relationships, not only intimate relationships, but friendships as well. And that's a related trauma symptom that individuals have after having sustained an interpersonal trauma like domestic violence.
Okay. And would it be helpful to have the full exam as opposed to one page out of it?
As with anything, seeing an entire profile gives one more information.
Your Honor, I'd move
What
the
the
admission
fuck,
of
Ringgit?
Defendant's Exhibit 15 for 1859,
Objection hearsay.
and I would argue the
If we
completeness
could
rule
approach
again.
for this.
What the fuck? Ringgit, dollar. Ringgit, Malaysia.
Now, Dr. Hughes, you were shown a couple of finger pictures of Mr. Depp. And I believe you indicated those were shown to you, and I think you were asked if these were severe injuries, correct?
Correct.
All right. Did you have any understanding of the cause of those injuries by Mr. Depp?
I do understand that there's competing accounts of what happened, for
All
sure.
right. Let's bring up Defendant's Exhibit 373. Your Honor, I think this is already admitted.
I don't see it, and Jamie doesn't have it, so 373, I can mark it, but it's not admitted yet.
I think there was
Unless
a
it's-
version of that. If I may,
I don't know that.
Your Honor,
I can just tell you that 373 has not been admitted into evidence.
Your Honor, it's not redacted, and I don't believe it's been admitted.
the part I'm trying to admit is in another exhibit, so let's go in a different way. We'll take that one down. Let's go with 398.
398 redacted is in evidence.
That might be the one. All right. If you could blow that up. And I think we're looking for, if you could move that up, Michelle. There we go. You could blow that one up. And this is an email from Mr. Depp to David Kipper. Your understanding was that was his doctor, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And then I'm going to draw your attention to the last part of this. This is on 3/19/2015. Thank you for everything. I have to figure out how to do this. I'm missing the controls on this. Thank you for everything. I've chopped off my left middle finger as a reminder that I should, thank you, Your Honor, that I should never cut off my finger again. Do you see that?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so that's Mr. Depp admitting that to Dr. Kipper in 3/19/2015.
Objection leading.
Okay,
I sustain the objection. Next.
okay, that's fine. I'm good with that. Let's go to Defendant's Exhibit 499. And, Your Honor, I believe this one is in as well, or is it the
It's a
redacted?
redacted one.
Yes, that's the
Okay.
one. Thank you. And then if I could draw your attention, this is a text message from Mr. Depp to Erin Falati. We talked about her earlier on 10/31/2015. And it says, this is the second time he's held off giving me my meds by blackmailing me into seeing him. The first time I had just chopped my finger off. Do you recall seeing that as part of the documents that you reviewed?
I believe I did.
Okay, thank you. We can take that down. Now, you were also asked to listen to an audio tape, and it's Plaintiff's 343. I'm going to, and do you recall listening to that audio tape at some point as part of your review?
Yes, I do.
Okay, I'm going to now pull up that same audio tape from the same date, and I believe it's June 2016. And if we could go to, and we're going to have a few different ones, so hold in there with us. We're going to start with 2 minutes 40 seconds 00, going to 2 minutes 40 seconds and 21.
knocking on the door. I don't
Because
get why
that is a
one
fucking
informs the other.
irrational and violent fucking maneuver.
How
So
does
a
one
man would
inform
want
the
to
other?
get out of.
How does one inform the other?
Oh, man. Go home and listen to the tape.
Now, that was just before the punching, hitting that was played. Do you recall that?
Objection leading.
Well, the tape recording that you listened to was at 2:46:01 to 2:47:20, and that was 2:40 through 2:40:21. Correct?
I understand. yes.
Objection leading.
Okay. Now let's go to after that.
Overruled, go ahead.
Thank you. Now let's go to after that, 2:52:00 to 2:52:34.
Just yesterday. Because of how it's been lately. Like since Australia. And I have been on the road with you. I haven't been working. I don't know what else I could fucking do.
Since Australia, we had a great time over in the fight. We had a fight on the job.
Yeah.
Physical.
Yeah.
Then we had a fight in San Francisco. But I thought everything else was great. You see, longer than distance from Australia.
No.
And then let's go to 3:20:00 to 3:21:37. And while they're getting that, I'll just ask you the question, Dr. Hughes, do you recall that Mr. Depp said that they had fights in the places that he listed on that audio tape?
Objection leading.
Sustained.
All right. What do you recall Mr. Depp saying about fights that they'd had on that audio tape?
Objection, no foundation.
She just listened to it.
Overruled, okay.
I think it was hard to hear in this one. I had listened to it previously, just acknowledging that there were fights previously.
Okay. Thank you.
Just couldn't take the idea of more physicality, more physical abuse on each other. Because as we continue, it
I know.
fucking bad. Baby, I told you this once. I'm scared to death. You're a fucking crime scene.
I know.
If we don't get our shit together, and that, by getting our shit together, that might mean fucking A, we do this, we make it. That might mean, goddamn, you know, say, I've tried, done, to do, but we've got to get
Why is she
together
acting?
as individuals and as a couple. Because I love you. And I do not want to leave you. I do not want to divorce. I do not want to get out of my life. I just want peace. If I'm the culprit, majority of the time, I will fucking do everything I can. And I will recognize when I'm fucking starting to go sideways. I will recognize it.
Do you recall listening to that part of the tape, the audio tape?
Yes, I do.
And what do you recall from that portion? Again, I know it's hard to hear, but
It's hard to hear, but what I recall from hearing that was the negotiation that the couple is trying to do and trying to say, you know, I'm going to do my part, I'm going to do better.
okay. Is it possible to turn that up anymore, or is it, I have one more. I'm just. Thank you, Jamie. Okay, my last one is 3:26:20 to 3:29:50.
Your Honor, can we approach?
Okay, yes, sir.
you're ready.
What are we going to do different in the moment when you're mad and you go fuck it and you decide all bets are off?
Look what I did in Australia. Look what I accomplished. I put the fucker away. I told myself every fucking day, no, he's gone. No, fucking put him away. Put him away. And by a list of the things that I feel that on my list, I remember it, and I try to bring it down notches, many notches. I'll try, if we're heightened, to say, please, I don't want you to feel this. I don't want to feel this.
I need to know what we need to do different. I need to
It's
know.
got to be done with your mind and your heart.
What do we do different if I have a problem? You need to tell me how to tell you different if I'm hurting you. You need to let me be able to be mad. Sometimes you're going to make me mad. I'm a human. I cannot live where it's like,
Well, then it's the same thing goes for me then. You're going to have to allow me to get mad.
yes, exactly. If I do
But
something
you
that
get
makes
mad
you
and then you
mad,
start fucking yelling.
I don't have to start yelling. I think I start yelling once it gets fucking heightened. I've gotten a lot better about that. It's just I only start yelling when it's fucking hour 11 and we're really in it.
You're not going to like that. Otherwise you wouldn't have had 3 physical fights in the last month and a half.
I was talking about the yelling.
No, but you witnessed it. You're the one that brought it up. Australia was fucking great. We just argued. Let's go back there. Let's go back there in our fucking heads and in our hearts. Let's go back there. And know on your
Is
list.
the monster gone? Did you put him away? It's been so, when you get on that train and you get angry, you stay on it for so long and you won't come down, you won't talk to the person that is you.
That's not always.
It doesn't have to always be the monster, but what is it? Can you put that away? Can you remember the bigger picture? You don't want to spend your life. I've asked you this so many times in fights. You want to spend your time like this. No, you don't. But I ask you because this is something you're choosing. I'm saying to you, olive branch. And you don't take my olive branches. You made me feel humiliated for offering them. You asked me to stay in Australia. I stayed, and then you walk out on me all the time. You've got to take some olive branches from me. You've got to offer them too. You've got to be bigger than what you feel at that moment. And so do I. So do I. But if I call you on it, will you hear it? Will you call me out on it if I'm doing it?
Do you remember listening to that, Dr. Hughes?
Yes, I do.
And what is your interpretation of that? What do you recall?
Objection, Your Honor. Speculation.
She's an expert.
Overruled.
I think this is more of how this couple is trying to negotiate in the face of all of the turmoil and the violence and the abuse. I think it's important pointing out, is my recollection is that there's 2 Australias. They're talking about the honeymoon Australia, not the Australia where the incident happens. They go back, and that becomes a honeymoon time for them. And I think certainly hearing how this couple has talked about the monster and the person who comes out, as we talked about that cycle of violence where the person who, hurts her and hits her and controls her isn't the same person that she loves and she cares about and that she wants to be with.
Thank you, Dr. Hughes. Now, you also were asked about Dr. Bonnie Jacobs and her treatment and her treatment notes. And did you review those treatment notes from Bonnie Jacobs?
Yes, I did.
I'm going to ask you to turn to, can we bring up Defendants 1059? And do you recognize this document?
Yes.
Okay. And what is it?
This looks like the first of Dr. Bonnie Jacobs' treatment notes starting in October 17th, 2011.
Okay. And do you recall whether Ms. Heard was already in a relationship with Mr. Depp at that time?
Yes, she was.
Okay. And you testified quite extensively yesterday about Bonnie Jacobs' notes and entries there. Were those reflected in these notes?
These were the notes that I...
Objection leading, Your Honor.
I'm sorry.
I can ask it differently. And what, if any, of those citations that you gave to the jury were in these notes?
Objection compound.
Overruled.
These were the notes that I was referring to yesterday.
And what was the significance of these notes to you? You were asked again about them on cross.
I found the treatment notes very significant because they had contemporaneous reports of what Ms. Heard was going through, not only what she was reporting in her relationship with Mr. Depp, but her accompanying symptomatology. What the notes revealed was there's a significant amount. Well, we see it unfold in time. We see where the violence starts, and we see how it unfolds. We see at least 3 indications of sexual assaults. We see constant pleadings and upset about his substance abuse and trying to find ways to get him help. And she joins Al-Anon to get herself help as a family member of someone who struggles with substance abuse. We see how she's reporting a lot of controlling behavior and obsessive behavior. We see that there's 2 instances where the police were going to be called and when in her apartment in Orange because of the fighting at that time. Once they actually were called and once they weren't, from what I could amass from the notes. So what it does is it really shows how this relationship is unfolding over time and actually getting worse.
And then you indicated that Amber Heard moved from Bonnie Jacobs to Dr. Cohen, and that was in 2014. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And what is your understanding of the relationship between Dr. Cohen and Dr. Kipper?
They were professional colleagues and they were friends. And it's understanding why Ms. Heard left the relationship with Bonnie Jacobs. It became a tumultuous relationship for her there because she was doing a lot to protect Johnny, and Bonnie Jacobs had concerns.
Objection, Your Honor.
What's the objection?
No foundation.
I established the foundation. She reviewed the notes, and she interviewed Bonnie Jacobs.
I'll overrule the foundation objection.
Go ahead.
Objection non-responsive.
I'll overrule non-responsive.
Please continue, Dr. Hughes.
The reason that Ms. Heard left her treatment with Bonnie Jacobs were, one, that Mr. Depp continued to denigrate that relationship, or therapeutic relationship. But number 2, really more importantly, is that she wanted to protect Mr. Depp because she didn't want Dr. Jacobs had some concerns about perhaps his substance using in front of his children, and that she would be a mandated reporter. So Ms. Heard did not want to do anything and talk more about what was going on with Mr. Depp with her therapist for fear that something might happen. So she left that treatment really to protect Mr. Depp.
I'd like to move the admission of Defendant's Exhibit 1059, the treatment notes.
Objection to hearsay, Your Honor. This is what we dealt with yesterday.
Your Honor, I think that for completeness here, he's relied upon these, and they reflect the present sense impressions.
I'll sustain the objection to hearsay.
All right. Let's go to Defendant's Exhibit 1057, please. And Dr. Hughes, you also indicated that you relied on the treatment notes of Dr. Conan, correct?
Connell Cohen, yes.
That's it. Okay, and you also interviewed him as well?
Correct.
Okay, and
Well, this was a continuation of her treatment, and the treatment here where it seemed like Dr. Connell Cohen was going was a harm reduction model, really trying to help Amber stay safe in the relationship by not talking back, by leaving, by not engaging. And those are very sort of short-term strategies when you're in a relationship mired with interpersonal violence. What we also see is what I mentioned yesterday is her psychological status and functioning continues to deteriorate. She continues to have more anxiety, more affect dysregulation, sort of feelings are coming up and down all the time. She's having more sleep problems. She's going on more medication. And the sort of the conceptualization and understanding of that is, sort of exposure to repeated trauma causes psychological disequilibrium and destabilization. And we're sort of, again, seeing the trauma unfold over time. And also in these notes, certainly there are those contemporaneous reports that correspond to specific incidents, like I was speaking with you yesterday about the Boston plane incident. There are actual notes where she called him after
Objection, Your Honor.
she called
Yes,
him.
what's the objection?
Beyond the scope of the question.
All right,
I think
I'll
so.
sustain the objection. Next question.
Okay. What, if any, additional information did you get from Dr. Cowan that assisted you in your opinions?
Well, certainly from the notes, as I was stating, that, there were times where right after an incident, Ms. Hurd wrote, she contacted Dr. Cohen either by text or by email and saying, Johnny did a number on me tonight. I really need to see you. I'm safe. I'm hurt, but
Objection,
I'm safe.
hearsay.
I think she can rely on hearsay. Your Honor.
Sustain the objection to hearsay.
Okay. Well, Your Honor, I'm going to move the admission of the notes, defendants 1057.
Good job.
Objection, hearsay, Your Honor.
Sustain the objections. Thank you.
Move to strike the hearsay testimony as well.
No, we'll continue on. Go ahead.
Thank you.
Objection,
You were
hearsay.
asked about a knife. You were shown Plaintiff's Exhibit 92 and a knife that's, I think, is till death. What is your understanding of the significance of that knife and that phrase as it related to Amber Heard?
Objection, Your Honor, no foundation.
He showed it in cross-examination. I'm able to ask about it and what her understanding was. He cut her off when she was trying to talk. I'm just letting her go back.
Her understanding of a knife?
Let's pull up Plaintiff's 92. Tom, can I get you to do that, please?
Oh my god. Karen Elaine got schooled. Oh my god.
I believe you in response to the questions asked by counsel for Mr. Depp, you said it depends upon what the context is. What did you mean by that?
Well, first I believe that this is the knife that has a turquoise end, and this was a time when Mr. Depp was filming The Lone Ranger, and he was in a turquoise phase, and she purchased him that because she thought it would be a kind gift. The phraseology is that Mr. Depp told her the only way out of this relationship is death.
And
Objection, hearsay.
I don't understand the objection. I think she was entitled to be able to speak to that.
But
Yeah, it's Mr. Depp's statement, the party opponent
I'll
admission.
overrule the objection.
Thank you. Okay. And what is your opinion? What do you think of that as a clinical psychologist in specializing in IPV and trauma?
I mean,
Objection, Your Honor. Can we
Okay.
approach?
Sure.
Dr. Hughes, do you think that the phraseology on the knife bears any relationship or significance to the opinions you've had in this case?
Objection, Your Honor. Leading.
Sustain the objection.
What, if any, significance you have provided in this case?
Objection, Your Honor, beyond the scope of the disclosure.
He brought it up in
I'll
cross. Your Honor.
overrule the objection.
Thank you.
So there are several things. I certainly am aware that at this time that Ms. Heard purchased this knife for Mr. Depp, she was engaged in her whole lot of denial and minimization about the extent of the violence in the relationship. There is a notation in Dr. Bonnie Jacobs' notes about when Mr. Depp uttered this to her, was around the discussions of the prenup, and he said, "I don't want one because the only way out of this relationship is death." Dr. Jacobs didn't think that that was funny. Ms. Heard was taking it like, oh, maybe it's endearing, maybe this is okay, but it was definitely a clinical cause of concern at the time that phraseology was used.
Thank you, Dr. Hughes. Now, you listened to an audio tape, and then we showed some additional ones from that. What, if any, photos did you review as part of your examination?
Objection beyond the scope of cross.
He was asking all the different authority. I'm just establishing that she also looked at photos.
I'll sustain the objection.
Okay.
It's beyond the scope.
Dr. Hughes, based on everything in the cross-examination and the redirect, what, if any, changes do you have to any of the opinions that you provided to this jury yesterday?
Objection compound.
Overrule.
I don't have any changes to my opinions that I gave yesterday.
And do you still hold those within a reasonable degree of psychological probability or certainty?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
All right, is this witness subject to recall?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. Ma'am, you can't discuss your testimony with anybody, but you're free to stay in the courtroom since you base your expert testimony, okay?
Thank you, Your
All right,
Honor.
thank you. All right, I think we'll go ahead. Yes, sir? Okay. All right, Judy. Let's go ahead and take our lunch break now. Just do not do any outside research and don't talk to anybody about the case, okay? We'll see you back here too, okay? All right, we'll be back at 2 then? All right, thank you.
This before we look at some of the prior testimony that happened. She testified, Dawn Hughes, that every time was asked that Amber became aggressive because she likely became destabilized by Johnny and therefore had no coping mechanism. But then when she was in therapy, she didn't mention any of these things to her therapist. Now she says they weren't mentioned because she was trying to protect Johnny. How does the jury view that kind of testimony from an expert witness when they're trying to get at what is the truth here?
It's a preposterous claim. And I would love to have seen the way the jury was looking when Dr. Hughes said that. Because Amber didn't, according to Dr. Hughes, leave out just one thing. She left out, according to strategically, think about that. She chose to leave out, according to Dr. Hughes, all of this information, all of this that could have been damaging to Johnny Depp. So she excluded all of that. So according to Dr. Hughes, it was a way for Dr. Hughes and Amber Heard to just write off what we would call omissions. These are significant omissions that you would expect a person in therapy to mention. And she didn't mention them because she, according to Amber Heard and Dr. Hughes, she was trying to, what? She was trying to protect Johnny Depp. It's not just one thing, not like one scratch in the face. She's claiming that she excluded multiple incidents of aggression by Johnny Depp because she didn't want Johnny Depp to be embarrassed. That's just preposterous. And if it's even remotely true, which it doesn't seem likely, it shows that, one, Dr. Hughes is willing to write off anything that's inconsistent with her claim that Amber suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder. And two, it seems as though it's an admission in one way or another that Amber is capable of manipulation, of omission, of changing her story, of adding and subtracting details at critical times to make her case.
So why don't we listen to a little bit of what happened in the courtroom, first from Dawn Hughes talking about Amber's PTSD diagnosis.
There were 4 tests that supported that diagnosis. One was the PAI, which was that 344-question large-scale personality inventory. On that test, her largest subscale, her highest subscale was the one that measures traumatic stress. So that was clinically significant. On the TSI, 2 of her scales were the intrusive experiences dimension and the defensive avoidance dimension, 2 of the classic scales of trauma and PTSD. On the PCL, which is the post-traumatic stress disorder checklist 5, that she scored in all 4 domains of PTSD, and that's an instrument that says how much are you bothered by these symptoms, and in all 4 clusters, which would be the intrusive experiencing, when things about the abuse or the trauma enter your mind when you did not want them to. Sometimes they're cued, sometimes they're uncued. She answered in the avoidance category, which is a second category of PTSD, that I do things to try not to think about this, to try not to feel this, to try not to get upset. Sometimes I avoid certain people because they become a trigger for me. She scored in the what we call the negative alterations in cognition and mood, changes in her thoughts and feelings as a result of the abuse and trauma, and also in the physiological hyperactivity, the hyperarousal, the hypervigilance, the startle response. So on the PCL, she endorsed symptoms in all 4 of those categories, saying, some of these symptoms are bothering me a lot. And then finally, the clinician-administered PTSD scale for the DSM-5. And what that allows me to do, unlike the PCL, is really look at symptom severity and symptom frequency. How is this really playing out for this individual? And similarly, she scored in all 4 categories of trauma and of having intrusive experiences and nightmares and avoidance efforts and physiological hyperactivity and changes in her mood and her thoughts. And her total score was a 28, which falls in the moderate range. So that means that she has experiencing a moderate degree of post-traumatic stress disorder symptomatology. And those tests allow me to make that definitive diagnosis that she suffers from PTSD.
Karen Felicia Nance, we only have about 19 of 20 symptoms, which meant that she was making it up because when you dialed it down, it was a lot less. Do you think the jury is going to cancel these experts out and go by what they see and heard from Johnny Depp and what they see in the courtroom from Amber Heard?
I believe the experts will cancel each other out because the bottom line is it doesn't matter what was the impetus for her behavior, but we know that she did have obnoxious, to say the least, behavior from listening to the tapes. And so I think that this is the prosecution's defense's way of just trying to excuse or explain away her behavior.
And Neil Rock, I would literally have about 20 seconds left. Your final thought. Snippet.
Yes.
Yes.
I've heard enough. I've heard enough. I've heard enough. Yes, it's going to come down to Johnny Depp and Amber Heard. That's it. The rest is just fluff and background.
That's right. Those are the two most important witnesses. My co-host, Michael Bryan, has been saying that from the get-go. It's Johnny Depp, Amber Heard. The rest is just fluffer nutter, as you say, Neil. Karen Felicia Nance will be staying with me. Obviously, Neil, thank you. I'll see you next week. Jesse Weber will be on soon. Stay with us here at the Long Crime Web Network as we answer your questions.